Welcome back to Pairswellwithknitting. This is a knitting podcast all about knitting, yarn adventures, and travel. Thanks for joining me today. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing in on one type of piece, or knitwear, and today I'm calling this Pairs Well with Vests. This is an episode all about vests and slipovers as we transition into a different season, either fall or spring, that can help be a great layering piece. These pieces, of course, that you're going to be seeing have no sleeves or have a very mini micro sleeve. Let's do this. My very first piece of what I'm wearing, this is the Slda Nut crop by Caitlin Hunter. This is a crop sweater that is knit from the top down using 4 different colors of yarn. I use 2 strands held together of Holts Garn Supersoft on a US 5 needle or 3.75 millimeter needle. And pretty much met gauge with that. The colors I chose were, to me, super autonomous. This is a mix of Jasper, Vintage Heather, Ember, and Cinamon. I feel like this is just a wonderful fall garment. Obviously, it can be worn in spring as well, depending on your color palette and choice. But I find for me, this is just a perfect pairing for fall. It definitely has all that cozy vibe, warming spices, leaves changing, and I just adore this. I am not the biggest color work fan because I find managing my yarn a little challenging at times. I found the color work chart fairly easy to follow along with. It was something that I didn't need to have my phone out in front of me as I was knitting because I found the color work charts are fairly symmetrical. And when they're symmetrical, I find they're a little easier to memorize and more natural for me to get in the flow. With this, I pretty much followed the pattern. I did increase the length at the body a bit of the lice stitch, or perhaps double lice stitch. I finished with a 1x1 rib, which it called for. I did my naughty dirty secret that I'm going to get into of my bind off. And the sleeve that I did was a little longer, I believe, yes I did, than was in the pattern. The pattern finishes right where you leave off and separate for the sleeves with this little like Y design. It's a little hard to see because I have dark and dark. I extended that out a bit, and then I added a little section of the light stitching here to give some length on the sleeve. Because I believe in the original pattern, it just kind of stops here, which is cute. But I wanted something a little longer. And I think because my gauge was a little tighter, only because of my yarn choice, that I wanted to extend it out and really appreciate all of that extra little bit going on in the color work. I love the motif, and I feel like it looks a lot more complicated than it is. And I know that this has been such a popular pattern for people to knit on, just to showcase beautiful yarns. With this, because there are such a varying amount of lengths or weights that you can use for this sweater, I think a lot of people are using scrap yarn, or you can use scrap yarn. I purchased new yarn because I really had this autonomous vision when knitting and preparing this crop, but it was a great time. So that's the Soldotna crop by Caitlin Hunter. Next, I'm going in chronological order of my vests and slipovers that I produced. So you're gonna see some older knitting for me, in that this is knitting from the beginning of my learning of knitting. First up is the Holiday Slipover by Petite knit. This is a chunky, big gauge vest that's knit with 2 strands of yarn held together. And for myself, I knit this with 1 strand of Estelle Llama Natural Chunky in the colorway 106, and paired it with Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in Cloud. Now, this, because was the beginning of my knitting adventures, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't understand basic sweater construction, never mind vest construction. So I actually had to prepare calculations that I did to match the gauge that I was actually knitting at with the knitting needles that I chose or that were recommended in the pattern, because I didn't really understand how that all worked. And I also had to draw myself like little diagrams to help me visually see what pieces were being knit at what time. So in general, the holiday slipover begins knitting at the back flat. You increase, pick up, break your yarn, pick up for the sleeves, or I should say the shoulders, join, eventually increase, and it begins to knit in the round. I really had a little bit of a mind warp in the beginning of my knitting to get around this kind of puzzle piece, but we got there. And with all of the end sections of the neckline, the underarm, and the hem are all 1x1 ribbing, just single, nothing complicated. But for me, this was the complicated part, was the bind off. The bind off is all the Petite knit patterns are recommended to do Italian bind off. I did do this and it's quite pretty. Like, I'm pretty proud of that, but we didn't get there in one shot. There was a lot of ripping out. And if you've ever ripped out Italian bind off, it's a highly unpleasant activity to do. I plowed through to try to do my sides with Italian bind off, but fully gave up by the time I got to my split hem. And this is a split hem here that happens as well. That was also another little funny thing for my brain to get around. Now as a knitter, I think that's obviously not a problem, but in the beginning, we're knitting round, we're knitting flat, there's a lot going on. You're purling pearls, knitting knits, and then you're rotating through and knitting the pearls and purling the knits. It was a little much at the time. I do want to share some of my naughty dirty secrets with knitting here. So I did a knit over knit bind off at the front. I have never changed this. I have a yarn tail that I've left on, kind of like wrapped up into a gorgeous little safety pin here, with the thought of one day I'll rip it out, I'll make it prettier. It's never happened. I've worn this out many times because it's fairly neutral. It's very big and forgiving, and it's not getting redone. I'm fine with it. And you know what? It's kind of a really nice little memory of the beginning part of my knitting and how far that I've come and grown as a knitter. You're gonna see another holiday slipover soon, but before we do, chronological orders, winning my next vest, and that was a holiday slipover by Petite Knit. I don't know if I would recommend that as a very first vest pattern as a beginner knitter, but this one coming up, I sure do. This one is vest number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This is the first time I knit one of these patterns with My Favorite Things Knitwear, and a very simple, basic vest design. This is designed similar, obviously, to holiday slipover, where you're knitting and starting flat in the back, increasing, and basically getting into your shoulder stitches, knitting flat, and then you eventually attach everything and work in the round. You're adding, or I should say picking up stitches for the neck, the armholes, and the bottom. This has a circular or continuous 1x1 ribbing bottom. The difference as well with this and the holiday slipover is that this involved a double folded collar. This was my first time doing this and really satisfying. This is before I got a crochet hook, and I have to say this was done with a knitting needle in the beginning of my knitting. Pretty tidy, if I say so myself. And naughty dirty secret, this started my love of doing a purl over purl bind off. It's a tidy little bind off, and it's not Italian bind off, so it takes a lot less, I think, brain power for me. It's relatively efficient, but it's just, it's tidy. It makes sense to me, and I don't have to fiddle with long pieces of yarn as I go. I think I'm like a cat and I just get all tangled up. It's a disaster. So this works well for me, and this I continued throughout, like even on the arms. And it may not be as beautiful as the Italian bind off, but this is what I choose to do, I think, for almost all of my bind offs, other than binding off in pattern. This yarn I used was the Falkland Erin Heathers by Debbie Bliss. This is from the Pure Bliss collection. I don't have a colorway recorded, sadly. And I knit this using a US size 8, which is a 5mm needle. And yes, I have a little cheater book that can help me with the needle sizes today, so I don't get that a little mixed up. This was a nice easy knit, especially I think because this was my second vest as well. I understood more vest construction, and the bind offs were a cinch compared to what I tried before. So that is the vest number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I definitely recommend this as a first type of vest garment if this is what you're into. It also is a really flattering, simple vest that pairs well with everything. Next up on the docket, we've got a Slipover short sleeve sweater that I decided to go a little rogue on. And this, I do not have a name, of course, because it's just my own little hoo-ha of a design. This is a top-down raglan sweater or short sleeve that is knit using 2 strands held together of Yorkshire Spinners in the cayenne pepper colorway. So this is a sock yarn. It's a blend of wool and nylon, so it's a tough blend of yarn. It still offers a little bit of a rustic quality. I don't know if you can kind of see, but there's a nice like little halo even for sock yarn, so that's pretty sweet. The colors what drove me when I saw this at the yarn shop. I knew it's something that I adore. What I did with this is I did a 1x1 ribbing in all the areas of ribbing with neck, motorcycle, one moment. Okay, 1x1 ribbing in the neck, the arm, and the bottom, all in the round with the purl over purl bind off, like not shabby. And my increases I did for my raglan, I did yarn overs, and I let the yarn overs show, so I didn't knit them through the back loop or anything. I wanted to have that little design of the little laces, the little lace stitches as you go. It's a fun one. This I ended up, the way that I knit it and separated out for the sleeves, it was quite large along the bust. So I did decreases as I went along the body. So it kind of gives a retro, like vintagey vibe. But I think if I was gonna knit this idea again, I would have increased less at the body while doing the raglan stitches, and just at one point increased at the sleeve. Therefore increasing the sleeve amount and width, but not necessarily the body. So I wouldn't have to do those decreases as much and get that like kind of upside down V triangle going on, which is fine. This is all part of learning. That is like my own kind of summery-esque slipover that I did in the cayenne pepper colorway. Fun, spicy. The next slipover I have, or vest, is my second holiday slipover by Petite Knit. This one goes with the spicy factor. It must have been my mood at the time. This is in 2 strands held together of Plötulopi in their red shade, with 1 strand of Rowan Kidsilk Haze in their colorway 606. To my memory, it was a bright pink. So the idea is that from afar, it's, you know, a nice cherry red, but actually if you can see up close, I don't know if we can, there's a hint, oh you can, how sweet. There's a hint of like that kind of raspberry-esque pink. So you're getting every so often like a little hit of like a silky pink color coming at you from the red. This is a really dense knit. This I had no issues in constructing, because obviously I knit the holiday slipover already. This was knit in a very much tighter gauge, surprisingly, than my first holiday slipover. So I followed the size medium on this one, and it's quite a bit tinier. I really enjoy the fit. I did a high-low split hem, and I believe that's recommended in the pattern as well. I did one of those pearl over pearl cast-offs. The one issue I do remember was not only the neckline, but the armholes. I actually had to pick up less stitches than was recommended in the pattern for each, because otherwise what was happening is I was getting a flare out happening with my underarm and shoulder area. The whole armhole was flaring and looked a little butterfly. I wasn't into it. I wanted it to be flush. So I ended up, I think, picking like, I don't know, it might have been like every 3 or 4 stitches, maybe even less depending where he was. And same with the neckline too. I picked up a lot less stitches than was recommended in the pattern. This is the only thing that I've knit that is a little tight going over the head, but when it sits and you're wearing it, it looks really nice, crisp, fresh. It's a good knit. I really enjoyed this one, and I wear it quite a bit. So that is the holiday slipover by Petite Knit in the Plötulopi and a soft silk mohair. Next up, you have seen this one before. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and I didn't. Is the Noor vest. This is a vest by Silcafa. This I did in, I featured, and I think it was my very first episode. And ironically, I'm in the same spot filming where I filmed my first episode. The Noor vest is a more challenging vest for sure. That it has a lot of different parts to it, but the details shine through. I had knit this with 2 strands, 1 strand of the Llama phenol in a straw colorway, I'll put it in the show notes, and 1 strand of La Bien-Aimée in the silk mohair. First of all, the silk mohair was a dream to work with, and second of all, Llama phenol is definitely one of my favorites. So this was just a great time to knit on. This is knit from the back first flat with interesting increases where you get this gorgeous little, like, just definition of increased shoulder area that cascades down through the armhole. I just find it just a stunner. The shoulders, for when you pick up the sleeves, and that's, I don't mind picking up stitches from for necklines or for armholes, but definitely making sure that you're picking up the same amount on both sides, I find a little stressful. This sleeve, because it becomes like you've almost created a V where your arm would go through. If you were to knit flat on this, it wouldn't sit right. So what the designer has done is she has you working short rows back and forth. This, of course, was way before I taught myself how to do the German short row. So these are all wrap in turns, but worked out really nicely. So a little more minds on for sure of this knit. Finishes in a 1x1 ribbing with my pearl over pearl cast off. The neckline is a folded neckline that I stitched down with, I think I crocheted, hooked this guy down. And yeah, you've got a split hem that happens at the front and back. Front's a little shorter than the back, so it's slightly high-low. I believe in the pattern it was even more exaggerated, and I've worn this heaps. This is the Noor vest by Silcafa. Fun knit. My next vest or slipover, this was featured in one of my Nova Scotia episodes. This is the Amy Slipover by Garn. This is a really loud knit, and I have worn it so much in the cooler evenings of the summer, definitely into fall. this was knit with one strand of Briggs & Little single ply yarn in, I think it was like their natural colorway, again in the show notes. And I've paired it, except on the ribbing of course, on the bottom rib and the ribbons on the side, with memorable yarn from Vienna. So these two were from yarn that I picked up in Austria last summer. The highlighter yellow is from a shop in Toronto. That was the Juggle, in like just this fun bright color. And it was great to knit on. As in my last episode that featured this, I knit this a lot smaller because I wanted it closer to the body and not as oversized and boxy. And it was great. I think I cast on, it was quite a bit less. It was like 30 less stitches than what the pattern called for, but I just modified according to that as I continued to knit on the Slipover. I do have to say that the ribbons, if you've seen other podcasts, they are a bit of a slog to get through. Not bad, but you know that going in. And this is where you learn to do the crochet hook cast on, because you have nothing to cast on to really that ground your stitches. So you're casting on using a crochet hook. And that was interesting. It was a great piece of learning that I've actually used since. This is a high-low hem, and I wear it all kinds of different ways with different things. It's transcendent on different things that I put it with. So that is the Amy Slipover by Garn. And last of my slipovers was in my most recent video. This is another Petite knit design. This is the Weekend Slipover. This Weekend Slipover is a really boxy, big, like lots of ease vest or slipover. Has of course no sleeves, but a lot of really beautiful little details. I knit this using one strand of a hand-dyed yarn by the Dye Guy of Encompassing Design Rug Hooking Studio. Show notes, it'll be all in there, with one strand of soft silk mohair from Garn. It's the tin silk mohair in like a Arctic white. And this was a really quick knit. I mean, it's a heavy guy. I knit this using a US 8 needle, which is a 5.0, and yeah, it was fun. So again, basic knit construction for vests. You're knitting flat, you're picking up the sleeves, you're knitting down. Nothing's really different there. I did the round hem, which I believe, yes, is in the pattern for the Weekend Slipover. Picking up the armholes, I picked up quite a bit less because I was running out of yarn. I did a purl over purl bind off. I mean, this underarm is the most beautiful armpit ever, with it's a centered decrease that's done, and it's just gorge. So like, show off those pits. And the neckline in the pattern was quite a bit higher to create like this gorgeous mock neck, almost turtleneck that you could probably fold over. Again, because I was super tight on yarn, I actually had to rip out to give to other parts of my slipover. So it's quite a bit shorter, but I enjoy it because I enjoy wearing a collar, having my collars up, slouching them over, and it allows for the collar to show off. And this super shines. I didn't think I would be wearing it that much because it is such a big knit, and it's quite heavy from the Canadian rustic yarn, but I've been wearing it a lot. I like it with big loose jeans because I like that big loose look everywhere, but as well, of course, with like tighter jeans, it's a good piece to have. I've really enjoyed it. So that's the Weekend Slipover by Petite Knit. Okay, I think that's that. So vests and slipovers, I mean, I don't think this goes as any surprise, especially as knitters, but we're the boss of our own knitting. So any sweater design that you come across or that you've already knit before, you can definitely make into a short sleeve, super crop it, have 3/4 length. I mean, transitional knitwear doesn't have to be a completely sleeveless item, and I always feel like purchasing and supporting independent yarn or independent knitwear designers is great. We can also try to be a little more, I think, mindful of using those patterns and for ourselves, and including shorter sleeves, adding longer sleeves if this is what the pattern calls for. Again, you know, we can do what we want with our knitting. We're producing our own clothing. Thanks for joining me today as we walk through all of the vests and knitting, pairing well with all of these different yarns that I've chosen, and that you enjoy your pairings of yarn and pattern, that we are the boss of our own knitting. And if you want to crop something, crop it. If you want to add a sleeve, take away a sleeve of something, that you can. And I think you can make it your own piece. I hope you find joy in your knitting today. Thanks for coming out, and we will see you very shortly again. Take care.